decentralized internet is decided by the investors versus what happens on the main internet is decided by Twitter, Facebook, Google, and a small number of other companies.
Okay, so getting this layer on digital assets right, for Congress to understand this, everything is built upon that on-ramp to this new internet. So very important for us to be sensitive to how this develops and any actions we take in terms of laws and updating laws to incorporate these new technologies.
Yeah, Mr. McHenry couldn't agree more, and I think when you hear about all of the problems of different big tech companies, owner-controlled network becomes clear.
Okay, owner-controlled network rather than a cooperative, right? And thinking in those terms,
absolutely.
Right? So if you're not a part of management, you're not making a decision in Web 2. If you are a participant in the network, you're cooperating in the making of those decisions.
Exactly right.
Okay. So I ask this not to be insulting to the panel, but to have a level set here so we have an understanding of what we're talking about. This is not simply about you on this panel. It is about trillions of dollars of assets that did not exist before Satoshi wrote his white paper 13 years ago. It's about $3 trillion in notional value at this stage around the development of a whole new range, a whole new suite of technology that will be developed across the globe, whether or not the United States embraces it and wants to compete, or if it's pushed offshore. So as policymakers, we need to understand what we're talking about here. This is a small panel, important as you may be, a small panel about the discussion about Web 3. And so with that, Madam Chair, thank you for having this hearing, and I hope that we can have more understanding by policymakers about these important concepts. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you very much. The gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Maloney, who is also the chair of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Waters, for having today's hearing. Our financial system has been built up over time with us learning from each financial crisis, fixing and adjusting as new financial risks come forward. From the Great Depression and the creation of the FDIC and deposit insurance to the Dodd-Frank reforms after the 2008 financial crisis, we may not all agree on every aspect of those laws, but they've made our financial system and our entire economy more resilient and consumers and investors more protected when things do go wrong. In 2018, the New York Attorney General released a report from its Virtual Markets Integrity Initiative, which detailed a few key findings regarding crypto trading platforms on potential conflicts of risk and interest, lack of serious efforts to stop abusive trading activity, and limited protections for customer funds. The report stated, and I quote, "Customers are highly exposed in the event of a hack or unauthorized withdrawal. While domestic or foreign deposit insurance may compensate customers for certain losses of stolen or misappropriate fiat currency, no similar compensation is available for virtual currency losses." This is not a theoretical concern. In fact, Coinbase was reportedly the subject of a hack earlier this year, impacting at least 6,000 Coinbase customers. Ms. Haas, what happens today for a Coinbase customer in the event of a hack of Coinbase or a Coinbase wallet, or in the event of unauthorized withdrawal? What protections does a customer currently have? FDI insurance, commercial insurance, could you answer that question, please? Thank you.
बहुत important meeting हो रही है ये अमेरिका में.
So Coinbase does secure 12% of the world's crypto, as I shared with you earlier, and we have extensive controls to protect our customer assets. We bifurcate our assets into two different storage systems. We call one the hot wallet, and we call one cold storage. And less than 2% of our assets are held in a hot wallet, which is subject of a cyber attack. Specifically, the incident you mentioned was not a hack of the Coinbase systems, but in that event where customers did lose funds due to other losses, we did reimburse customers for that event. We do protect our customers for any hack of the Coinbase hot wallet, and we have third-party insurance, plus we use our own balance sheet to protect our customers for the event of loss on our platform.
Please pull the microphone closer to you and speak into it so all members can hear you.
Thank you so much.
Coinbase वाली को बोलना ही नहीं आ रहा.
With regards to what losses we typically see, though, in the press,
बाजी
we
slow बोल
typically see these are account takeovers at the end point, where a customer has lost their credentials
दूसरी
and
तरफ
has
जो है ना
been
बाबे
hacked
बैठे हैं,
of their own phone
बुजुर्ग
with their
बैठे हैं,
own
उनको
personal
आराम से
device.
समझाना है,
And
आहिस्ता
that is
आहिस्ता.
unfortunate at this point in time because that loss is not well protected for within the broader crypto economy.
जी.
That is something that Coinbase continues to study and would look to over
फिर तेज हो
time
गई.
do more to
Okay,
support our users
reclaiming
for
my
those
time,
losses.
reclaiming my time's very limited. Is that uniform, the protections you talked about for all crypto exchanges and wallets or just for yours?
I'm speaking specifically about the Coinbase protections. that we offer.
Okay, so it's not available to others. So do you think customers could benefit from some uniformity and standardized minimum protections if and when customers lose their funds through no fault of their own?
I do believe there's an opportunity there.
Richie? In addition to this committee, I have the honor of chairing the Oversight Committee, and we recently held a hearing on the rise of ransomware and strategies for disrupting criminal hackers. As detailed by a recent FinCEN report, $590 million in suspected ransomware payments were reported by financial institutions in the first 6 months of 2021, and it's getting worse. So it's no surprise to me that these criminals frequently seek payment for
बहुत important
ransomware
meeting है ये.
attacks through cryptocurrencies. And FinCEN
Live
identified
है.
several money laundering typologies for these actors. Ms. Dallaire and Ms. Haas are
लाइव ये चल रही है मीटिंग कांग्रेस यूएसए में. ये कांग्रेस वाले जो मीटिंग हो रही है, अब आसान लफ्जों में मैं सोच रहा हूँ ताकि गांव देहात वाला भी देख रहा हूँ तो समझ आ जाए, तो इसलिए मैं जरा नॉन टेक्निकल लैंग्वेज में आना चाह रहा हूँ. अमेरिका में जितने बड़े बड़े एक्सचेंज हैं, इसमें बाइनेंस को नहीं बुलाया, ओकेज को नहीं बुलाया, इसके अंदर जो अमेरिका में बड़े एक्सचेंज हैं, जो अमेरिका में रेगुलेटेड है, उनको बुलाया. कॉइन बेस को बुलाया है, पैक्सॉस स्टेबल कॉइन को बुलाया है, इसके अंदर जो है सर्कल को बुलाया है. अब उनसे इनके सेनेटर पूछ रहे हैं कि भाई क्रिप्टो को हम बैन कर दें, रेगुलेट कर दें, या किस किस्म की क्रिप्टो को हमें रोक देना चाहिए. तो ये यूएस की बहुत बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट मीटिंग हो रही है, लेकिन इसका रिजल्ट 1 मिनट में नहीं आएगा. जो यूएस में रहते हैं उनके लिए बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट है, और जो मेरे क्रिप्टो ग्रुप के लोग हैं उनके लिए बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट है. तो ये 1 मिनट में रिजल्ट नहीं आ जाता. कोशिश होगी कि आपको बताया जाए, दिखाया जाए कि क्या इसका रिजल्ट है. अभी तो कस्टमर प्रोटेक्शन में बात हो रही है कि भाई अगर हैकिंग होती है तो कौन जिम्मेदार होगा. कॉइनबेस ने बोला भाई हम खुद जिम्मेदार होंगे. अब वो इतनी तेज तेज बोल रही है और इतने भरम से बोल रही है कॉइनबेस वाली कि भाई हमारी भी गड़बड़ ना करा दे.
Has expired. The gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Wagner, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Haas, let's continue. SEC Chairman Gensler has indicated on multiple occasions that, and I quote, "The test to determine whether a crypto asset is a security is clear." However, Commissioners Peirce and Roisman noted that they believe there to be an obvious lack of clarity for market participants around the application of securities laws to digital assets and their trading. The lack of clarity is clear through the numerous requests that the SEC receives for these no-action letters. In your view, is additional guidance defining clear rules of the road for investors and market participants needed at this time?
वही इन्वेस्टर प्रोटेक्शन
Thank
की
you for
बात
the
हो
question.
रही
We
है.
believe this is a very important area of focus for the SEC and this committee.
स्लो.
We do agree that the laws are clear. However, existing laws, regulation, and legal precedent make it clear that blockchain tokens are not securities. So we believe that the law clearly shows that blockchain-based digital assets are one of two things: either a new form of digital property or a new way to record ownership, as Brian Brooks spoke earlier about. We do believe that clarity is needed because these are new assets. It's a new way of transacting with these new protocols that we spoke about, and I think it would benefit all of us in the ecosystem to have agreed upon definitions.
I couldn't agree more, and I would hope that Chairman Gensler would be listening to his commissioners and some of the feedback that you all are giving him. You know, we talk a lot about financial inclusion in this committee, and digital assets have the potential to provide fair access to financial services to all Americans, and I believe that Mr. Bank.
बेसिकली सिक्योरिटी एक्सचेंज कमीशन जो है उसमें इन्वेस्टर प्रोटेक्शन की बात हो रही थी. वो कह रहे हैं भाई अब क्रिप्टो जो सिक्योरिटी के तौर पर ट्रीट करें या फिर हम इसको ऐसे छोड़ दें. तो कॉइनबेस वाली ने ये बताया कि भाई ये सिक्योरिटी नहीं है और इसके ऊपर कोई पक्के हम प्रोमिसेस नहीं करते, तो इसलिए सिक्योरिटी एक्सचेंज कमीशन इस तरह हर एक को आड़े हाथों नहीं ले सकता अमेरिका का। ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट मीटिंग है और ये एक्सपेक्ट नहीं करो कि मैं भी 1 मिनट में मुझे पहले से पता चल जाएगा। मैं कोई जादूगर नहीं हूँ कि मुझे पहले से पता है इनका क्या रिजल्ट निकलना है।
in the U.S. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you for the question. This is a really important area. Understanding your time is limited, I'll just say that blockchain allows value and money to flow just like email. So it's very simple in terms of how it can get from one point to another, and it does so very, very quickly. The importance of that is it actually can cross borders much more simply than anything else that's out there today. So the value of blockchain is the ability to send from the United States, for example, and send to another country without having to reconcile with all the different software and intermediaries that exist today. So it eliminates intermediaries, it creates less friction in the marketplace, and it allows users who don't have bank accounts today or who choose not to get bank accounts or have been de-risked by banks from being able to be able to access this technology very cleanly because they can do so with a wallet.
Thank you very, very much for that input. And
Zabardast.
Mr. Allaire.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think financial inclusion is a critical design goal for many of us, and certainly as we think about USDC, today USDC as a payment technology for dollars on the internet enables users to.
ये USDT की तरह जैसे USDC है ना स्टेबल कॉइन, उसका करता धरता है।
That can be as low as a 20th of a penny, and with the throughput of the Visa network, that's a benefit that can be brought to individuals. And I'd like to really emphasize something for the committee, which is one of the most powerful things about this technology is that it is the open internet. Have an email account or a text message or access the internet. This is an open financial system, and when you combine.
ये मीटिंग इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है क्योंकि इसके अंदर अगर हल्की सी भी बहुत अच्छी बात हुई, मार्केट गई ऊपर, अगर बहुत बुरी बात हुई तो हो सकता है मार्केट के ऊपर कोई असर पड़ सकता है, जैसे मैंने पहले भी बताया था। सवाल सुनना जरूरी है। चलो भाई, तो बेसिकली हमारा सारा ध्यान भी इस पे है कि अमेरिका में
open financial system, and when you combine those kinds of access efficiency and that openness, it creates an opportunity for anyone with a mobile device anywhere in the world to seamlessly exchange value with one another.
Great, thank you. Mr. Brooks, in your.
हो ये तो पीछे से रोक दिया इन्होंने, क्या किया है?
Open financial system, and when you combine those kinds of access efficiency and that openness, it creates an opportunity for anyone with a mobile device anywhere in the world to seamlessly exchange value with one another.
Great, thank you. Mr. Brooks, in your.
ये उनकी तरफ से। अच्छा, अमेरिका पे इंटरनेट भी बंद होता है? ये अमेरिका की तरफ से बंद हुआ है, आप लोगों की तरफ चल रहा है नहीं चल रहा? देख के बताएं ज़रा मुझे, इनकी मीटिंग का स्केड्यूल कहाँ से मिलेगा? ये कांग्रेस की वेबसाइट से। इंग्लिश की बात की नहीं है शफकत भाई, बहुत सीधी सी बात है। वो ये कह रहे हैं कि कस्टमर का अगर अकाउंट हैक हो जाता है तो भाई कौन जिम्मेदार होगा? अगर अगर क्रिप्टो में पैसे किसी के चोरी हो जाते हैं तो कस्टमर प्रोटेक्शन की बात हो रही है, उसके ऊपर ज़्यादा बात हो रही है। और ये बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट वीडियो अच्छा इसलिए भी है, बाकी जितने भी लोग देख रहे हैं, अभी 10 बजे हमारा क्रिप्टो का लाइव सेशन होगा जिसमें आप लाइव पैसे कमा सकते हैं। और उसके लिए जहाँ वीडियो देख रहे हैं ना आप, ये देखें, इंपॉर्टेंट क्रिप्टो डिस्कशन हैपनिंग इन यूएसए टू ज्वाइन क्रिप्टो स्कूल। यहाँ आपने क्लिक किया, यहाँ क्लिक करने के बाद आप जो अभी 10 बजे होगा, ये मंथली पे क्लिक कर लें, ठीक है, या ईयरली पे कर लें, या बहुत आसान तरीका ये है कि आप ऊपर हैं यहाँ पे और यहाँ लिखा है बिकम सपोर्टर, बिकम सपोर्टर पे क्लिक करें। अभी 10 बजे सेशन होगा, उसमें आपने टपाटप पैसे बनाने हैं। और वीडियो स्टिल लोड हो रही है, नहीं चल रहा भाई लोगों के पास? ज़रा मुझे बताएं, चलने लग गया? ये कि हमारे पास बंद हो गया है?
Financial system, and when you combine those kinds of.
ये तो फिर वहीं पे है। भाइयों आपके पास चल रहा है? नहीं चल रहा, किसी के पास भी नहीं चल रहा, तो आई थिंक पीछे से। आई वांट टू इनरोल भाई जी, बिल्कुल आप अपने यंगर ब्रदर को डाल सकते हैं और उसे बोले पैसे लगाने सिर्फ सीखने हैं। क्या बात क्या हो रही है जोहेब भाई? फिर आप बताओ ना, हमारे पास तो नहीं चल रहा इस वक्त। इथीरियम जो है ये कांग्रेस वालों को दिखाने के लिए इन्होंने मार्केट को हल्का सा पंप देना शुरू किया है ताकि इनको लगे 44,000 पे आ गया। बीटीसी जो है वो 50 पे आ गया, लेकिन स्टिल 53,000 का लेवल बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है। 53,000 का लेवल जब तोड़ेगा तो वहां से लॉन्ग की पोजीशन बनती है बहुत अच्छी। उससे पहले ज़रा मार्केट अभी शेकी है, अभी मार्केट में हालात तो वाक़या ऐसे नहीं है कि घुसा जाए इसमें, अभी सिर्फ देखा जाए। भाई चला दो। ये हमारी तरफ से रुक गया या?
Open financial system.
अरे भाइयों, आपके पास चल रहा है इसके आगे? अच्छा, बहरहाल इसका अल्टीमेट ये है कि इसमें जिन लोगों को बुलाया हुआ है उनसे डिस्कशन हो रही है, ठीक है। दुबई में भी नहीं चल रही वीडियो फ्रॉम कांग्रेस लिंक, हाँ कई जगह चल रही है, कई जगह नहीं चल रही। भाई शहर का नाम लिखे और कहाँ वीडियो चल रही है। ओवरऑल मैं सबके लिए बता दूं, उमर टर्की में बिल्कुल आप माइनिंग कर सकते हैं, कोई इसमें मना नहीं है। टर्की में सिर्फ मसला ये कि बाहर जाने का जो चक्कर है उसका है, ठीक है। अभी टपाटप मेरा भाई ये है कि 10 बजे के लिए तैयार हो जाए और रात को 11:30 बजे आज जो है दबा के जो है आपका वो चलेगा। नहीं रुका हुआ है। सिटी बताएं, सिटी सबका रुका हुआ या मेरी तरफ रुका हुआ? डू यू थिंक इथेरियम यार? मलिक भाई अभी बहुत आपको अंदाजा भी नहीं है कि पाकिस्तानी न्यूज़ तो शायद इसको कवर भी ना कर रही हो, कितनी अहम न्यूज़ है पाकिस्तान में, शायद पता भी ना हो। CNBC टीवी पे ओपन कर लें, उधर चल रहा है। अच्छा CNBC बोल रहे हैं। CNBC यूट्यूब लाइव, CNBC यूट्यूब लाइव, तो इंडिया का कुछ आ गया। आ गया।
Do you think mandatory reporting of your reserves to federal regulators and submitting to their regular examination is a good idea and something you will each support?
Congresswoman, I am supportive of that federal supervision and of those reporting requirements and mandates, and I think that's critical to make this a mainstream infrastructure that can benefit the U.S. economy.
Thank you. And Mr. Cascarilla?
It's important to say that we are regulated as a trust company. We are a regulated financial institution. We have been since May of 2015. We were the first one in the entire country, and we're proud of that. And so our products already have a primary regulator that oversees our issuance.
ये पैक्सॉस का है जो फेसबुक के साथ मिलकर काम कर रहे हैं।
Meet in my question federal regulators. Mr. Alair?
Yes, we are supportive of federal supervision.
Good. And Mr. Cascarilla?
I think federal supervision can make sense, especially for firms that don't have a state regulator that oversees their activities.
ये कैसे तस्वीर खींच रहा है भाई?
Thank you. Ms. Haas, Mr. Backman-Fried,
ये क्या कर रहा है?
digital asset trading platforms like yours play an important role in the current functioning of stable coins and therefore also raise broader question about digital market regulation, supervision, and enforcement. Can each of you describe the method your platforms use to determine the price for exchanging virtual currency for fiat currency? I see that my time has expired.
कोई बात नहीं, आपका भी एक्सपायरी डेट करीब आ गई है
I
बाजी।
yield back.
अंदर ओला रीपा।
Time? Okay. Ms. Haas.
Coinbase is an agency-only platform. We do not engage in proprietary trading on our platform. All prices established on our platform are due to market makers, so we offer a platform for customers to come together to offer bids and asks on a variety of currencies that we offer on our platform. So the market price is determined by the market participants.
And at what stage of the transaction do you provide an assurance of or lock-in of an execution price?
So we have two products. We have a consumer product, and we have what we call our pro product for our institutions or more advanced traders. It's important that any customer can choose either platform, but we tend to see consumers choose our easy-to-use consumer platform. The price displayed on the screen to the consumer is the price that's locked in and that we guarantee to the customer.
Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Haas, you discussed in your written testimony how the future of blockchain might include new areas of tokenization. such as property, titles, even people's time. Could you discuss further what trends you currently see and how new asset classes could arise through blockchain technology?
Thank
Where
you
are we
for the-
going?
Thank you for the question. So I think it's important to share that anything can be tokenized, any item of value. And this is the internet of value that we're talking about with Web 3.0.
शादी
the
का
early
निकाह हर
things that we're
चीज
talking about
टोकनाइज
are the
हो सकती है.
protocol layer. Over the protocol layer, we see infrastructure being built, and then we see applications being built as the next layer. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, Stellar, Solana, these are all important protocol layers that we're talking about. And on top of these, we see applications. So an interesting article was published yesterday that gaming platforms, so video games that many of you may play, your children may play, gaming where NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which means they're different, every token is different. Think about a shield or a sword or something of value, are being most actively traded. And it was a significant percent of the assets in DeFi, decentralized finance, in November were traded in apps.
बहुत
And
important
so we're
बात है.
seeing all types of things. We've had early conversations with real estate developers to get broader global liquidity, more liquid markets for tokens. We've seen a lot of innovation in the payment space and a lot of innovation in NFTs with digital art. But this is just the tip. And I think just like back in the early 90s when we were thinking about the internet and we couldn't envision Uber, we don't know what the future is. And there's so much ahead of us.
Fascinating. Mr. Brooks, it's good to see you before the committee again. Could you discuss what key fundamental differences between banks and stablecoin issuers are important for Congress and regulators to understand when looking at regulatory proposals?
Sure. Well, Congressman Lucas, thank you so much, and it's nice to see you again as well. One of the historical differences between banks and stablecoin issuers is that banks in this country historically have been engaged in multiple different kinds of financial intermediation and risk-taking functions. Banks typically engage in three different things: deposit taking, lending, and payments. The core feature of stablecoins is they're a new payments technology, and payments are one of the core things that banks do, right? So banks historically innovated in payments by first having check clearing, then later having traveler's checks, then later having prepaid cards and things like that. Stablecoin is just the faster, most modern way of transmitting those values. Stablecoin issues, of course, don't present all of the risks that banking presents. They don't typically engage in lending or anything else. And this is one of the reasons why at the OCC we looked very carefully at the possibility that payment companies like American Express in a different generation, Circle today, might possibly qualify for bank charters. They're engaged in a core banking function, but not in the other banking functions. It's to my point earlier that sometimes crypto is reducing risk, not increasing risk.
Ms. Dixon, could you also discuss this for a moment?
I think that there's a really big opportunity with respect to blockchain. I think when you mentioned before about tokenized assets, there already are tokenized interest in real estate that exist on Stellar, for example, or in fractionalized interest in U.S. stocks. So there's opportunity for growth there. With respect to what we have with blockchain and what can be accessible, that banks already have available out there, but when they de-risk populations and they de-risk individuals out of the banking infrastructure, they can actually access accounts, hold their assets in a digital framework, and then do a lot of the same things that you can do at banking institutions, but these individuals couldn't get access to it before. So I think blockchain creates that financial inclusion that we're all talking about and that we all want to get to, and it does so, I think, with
अभी कोई इतनी बुरी खबर नहीं आ रही जिसकी वजह से मार्केट का कुछ वो अभी बड़ी अच्छा न्यूट्रल गुफ्तगू चल रही है, कोई ऐसी बात नहीं चल रही. सिर्फ इसमें वो हैकिंग वाला जो चक्कर है ना कि भाई अगर हैक होता है तो कहाँ से आएगा, वो है. तो कोई इतनी खास.
Bankman-Fried, could you respond to the criticism that stablecoins would be ripe for illicit financial activity, and could you compare this risk with other payment rails?
बहरहाल वो कह रहे हैं स्टेबल कॉइन जितने भी यूएसडीटी वगैरह ना इसकी वजह से इलीगल एक्टिविटी मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग वगैरह हो सकती है.
Market participants in the digital asset ecosystem have advanced surveillance techniques to prevent financial crimes for all digital assets, including stablecoins, conducting know your customer policies and blockchain surveillance.
FTX एक्सचेंज का जो है मालिक है.
Through our platform. And all legitimate stablecoin issuers, in addition to that, conduct sophisticated know your customer policies on all issuances and redemptions of those stablecoins. If you compare that to, for instance, physical cash, where no transactions effectively have know your customer or
बहरहाल ये बता रहा है कि भाई KYC के बगैर हम लोग कुछ भी अलाउ नहीं करते, USDT या USDC कोई भी अगर आप कर रहे हैं तो क्रिमिनल एक्टिविटी की सर्वेलेंस हो सकती है क्रिप्टो ब्लॉकचेन और ब्लॉकचेन इंटेलिजेंस के थ्रू।
Madam Chair, I yield back.
ये लाल वाली मैडम मेन मैडम है
The
अभी।
gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, who is the chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the witnesses for appearing as well. I trust that my volume is such that I'm being heard. If you can verify, I would greatly appreciate it.
We can hear you very well, Mr. Green.
जी हम भी आपको सुन सकते हैं जी,
Very
बताइए
much, Madam Chair.
कैसे आना हुआ।
In the last year, the digital asset market has exploded from about $500 billion to $3 trillion.
$3 ट्रिलियन की मार्केट हो गई भाई
Still
क्रिप्टो की।
extreme volatility, it seems, in this marketplace. Bitcoin, for example, lost half of its value.
बता रहा है भाई यहाँ बड़े बड़ों की माँ बहन एक हो जाती है, ये $55,000 से एकदम 42 पे आ जाता है।
Rebounded, of course, later on. But there are many problems leading up to the global financial crisis that seem to be manifesting themselves in the market currently.
ओह, बिटकॉइन के अगेंस्ट बात करने लग रहा है ये तो।
Investing, lack of transparency, the lack of transparency that I'd like to see, and adequate financial disclosure is not readily available. With the explosive growth in cryptocurrencies, at what point should we become concerned about the possibility of a bubble? At what point should we become concerned about the possibility of a bubble?
बहरहाल वो ये कह रहा है कि बिटकॉइन जो है ना जीरो पे भी जा सकता है और ये तमाम चीजें बर्बाद हो सकती हैं, जैसे ट्यूलिप का बबल आया था, जैसे एवरग्रांड का बबल आया।
Thank you, Congressman Green. It's terrific to see you again, and I always find your questions extremely perceptive. What I would say about that question is a lot of the price volatility of cryptocurrency has to do with the early stage of the market and the thinly traded nature of the asset compared to, for example, U.S. real estate, global equities, or anything like that. I think the message I'd land with this committee in response to your question, however, is some of the things that make U.S. equity and debt markets more stable and less volatile have to do with the fact that there's a lot more price discovery in those areas. And what I mean by that is, you know, in the U.S. we have regulated equity mutual funds. We have derivatives products and futures products that allow the free trading on a 24/7 basis that provides the market with forecasts of what's happening in the ecosystem. In the world of crypto, the U.S. hasn't responded by developing those tools for price discovery yet, and so the result in a relatively new, relatively thinly traded market is that one person unwinding their position can have a massive effect on the price. The last point I would just make very quickly is something like 80% of Bitcoin holders have never sold a Bitcoin. And so when you hear about a day when there was a giant price drop in Bitcoin, often it turns out that there was one or two large traders who were unwinding a leveraged position, and the vast majority of holders have enough confidence in it that they've literally never sold a unit of it. So I would argue we need more liquidity and more price discovery to tamp down volatility, not less.
जबरदस्त।
Thank you. Let's go to Ms. Dixon, please.
भाई वो ये कहना चाह रहा है कि जिसके पास भी बिटकॉइन है ना, वो अपना कोई बिटकॉइन नहीं बेचता। 80% लोगों ने अपना बिटकॉइन कभी बेचा नहीं है। ये जो मार्केट में उतार चढ़ाव इतना ज्यादा आता है, ये इसलिए आता है क्योंकि लेवरेज की पोजीशंस खुली होती हैं, सट्टे लगा रहे होते हैं फ्यूचर
I
पे।
think we're working in that direction. It's much like the early days of the web. We need to focus on consumer-oriented products that have a lot of information about the challenges and also brings the person through from a literacy standpoint, so they understand. You look at user experience, you look at UX design. All of these things are really, really important. And as we saw in the early days of the web, it happened. It came together. We became better at educating the audience about what's available and what's out there.
ये कोई सही इंडियन पहुंच गया भाई
blockchain is you have immutability, you have records that are out there that can't be changed. This information is already leveraged by Chainalysis, for example, in Elliptic, to demonstrate the different things that are happening on chain. And I think it allows us the opportunity to create a lot more foundational efforts with respect to user experience and focus on these consumer protection issues that you're talking about.
Mr. Samuel Bankman, if you would, please, like to hear from you.
Thank you for the question. One of the really innovative properties of cryptocurrency markets are 24/7 risk monitoring engines. We do not have overnight risk or weekend risk or holiday risk in the same way traditional assets do, which allow risk monitoring and de-risking of positions in real time to help mitigate volatility. we've been operating for a number of years with billions of dollars of open interest. We've never had customer losses, clawbacks, or anything like that, even going through periods of large movements in both directions. We store collateral from our users in a way which is not always done.
बहरहाल ये बात जो हो रही है लंबी कर रहा है कि भाई ये जो इतनी तेजी से मार्केट नीचे ऊपर आती है ना, इसको कैसे ठीक किया जा सकता है। तो सारे ये बता रहे हैं कि जिनके पास भी बिटकॉइन है, जैसे हम भी नहीं बेचते कभी, जिनके पास बिटकॉइन है वो नहीं बेच रहे। फ्यूचर ट्रेडिंग में जब जाते हैं, जब आप सट्टे लगाते हैं, तो उस लिक्विडेशन की वजह से एक पूरी रैली बनती है जिसकी वजह से मार्केट गिरती है। तो इसलिए नहीं गिरती कि पुराने बिटकॉइन होल्डर्स जो हैं वो बेच रहे हैं, वो तो कभी नहीं बेच रहे। तो ये उसी पे अभी सारे डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं
Compare that to what happens on FTX or other major
और अपने एक्सचेंज की भरमबाजियां कर रहे हैं। लेकिन यहाँ वो लोग बैठे हैं जो वाकई सही मानों में काम कर रहे हैं, जैसे FTX एक्सचेंज वाला बैठा है, कॉइनबेस वाला बैठा है।
There's a robust, consistent risk framework applied, and we're excited to work with the CFTC on our U.S. licensed and regulated venue to bring a lot of this to U.S.
इसमें देखो USDT का बंदा कोई नहीं बैठा हुआ, तो USDT वाले को बुलाया ही नहीं है, ओकेस को नहीं बुलाया, बाइनेंस को नहीं बुलाया, क्योंकि जो लोग अमेरिका में प्रॉपरली उनको सही लगते सिर्फ उन्हें बुलाया है।
Sessions is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much, and to the panel, we appreciate this opportunity to hear from you. I think it's
जैसे डिसेंट्रलाइज फाइनेंस के किसी यूनिसॉप या पैनकेक वालों को नहीं बुलाया, डिसेंट्रलाइज लैंड वालों को नहीं बुलाया।
going to make this work. I am tremendously impressed that from what I see, a lot of ingenuity, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, and lots of advice about the future, about where this can grow.
ट्रांसमिशन ज्यादा शेयर करें ताकि लोगों तक पहुंचे।
Very important for us to listen to. I'm in favor of what you do. I'm not sure I want to go as far as you do on robustness of how much oversight you really want, because I think that in your perhaps infancy, perhaps
टोकन छोड़ दे, अभी देख ले वो क्या बात कर रहा है।
what makes you better is what you are, and I respect that.
Good.
And I would ask, and I don't know which one of you to ask this, so I would just say we're always interested in a traditional financial model of identifying risk. What is a risk? We get very little into value, but a lot into risk. And so I would ask you that the value of much of this could be compared to stocks, IPOs when they first.
अबे वकार को नहीं बुलाया, पाकिस्तान को वो जानते भी नहीं है कि पाकिस्तान में क्रिप्टो का कोई काम इस तरह हो रहा है। वकार जका को क्यों बुलाएंगे? अमेरिका में जो लोग लिस्टेड हैं उनको बुलाया है। अब Binance.US भी है, OKs.US भी है, लेकिन उनको नहीं बुलाया। यूनिसॉप भी वहां पे काम कर रहा है, पैनकेक भी वहां पे काम कर रहा है। यानी यहाँ जो लोग बैठे हैं ना इस वक्त, ये मेन रेगुलेटर्स इनको समझते हैं कि ये मेन लोग हैं, क्योंकि पुराने हैं इनके एक्सचेंज। कॉइनबेस सबसे ज्यादा पुराना चल रहा है, बिटफ्यूरी बहुत पुराना चल रहा है, सर्कल बहुत पुराना चल रहा है, तो इसमें कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है।
You allow information to be freely gleaned, you do these things, but is there an investigation or an understanding about what might be risky even though you accept it or fraud? Anyone?
I'm happy to take that one, Congressman.
Thank you very much.
So I want to share a little bit. This is specific to the Coinbase platform. So on the Coinbase platform, we have various tools. One, in onboarding, as we've talked about, we do KYC. But also in when we onboard our assets. So we offer, as I mentioned, over 100 assets for trading on our platform. We have a robust assessment of each of those assets. We're looking at it for legal risks. Do we think it has the contours of a federal security? We do not list securities on our platform.
अभी तक सब पॉजिटिव चल रहा है, अभी तक तो कोई बुरी बात नहीं हुई।
Is this a scam? Are there real people behind those?
Right.
Are people behind them on the OFAC?
अच्छा, अब ये पूछ रहे हैं कि जो भी कॉइन लिस्ट होते हैं, तो वो अब जैसे बाइनेंस जो पाकिस्तान में चलता है, ओकेस जो पाकिस्तान में चलता है, वो उस पर बिल्कुल वो कॉइन्स हैं जो यूएस के बाइनेंस के एक्सचेंज पे नहीं है। तो वो ये पूछ रहा है कि भाई आप कॉइन की लिस्टिंग जो करते हैं, अगर उसमें स्कैम होता है, फ्रॉड होता है, तो कौन जिम्मेदार होगा? क्या कॉइनबेस जिम्मेदार होगा या जो एक्सचेंजेस अमेरिका में चल रहे हैं वो जिम्मेदार होंगे? उसके हवाले से अब वो जवाबदेही खातून, और वो यही बता रही होगी कि भाई हम KYC करते हैं, हम प्रोजेक्ट को सही तरह देखते हैं। जैसे अभी हमारी कॉइनबेस के साथ जो 10 अप के लिए मीटिंग होनी है, उसके लिए मुझे वहाँ जाना है अमेरिका। ये वेरिएंट की वजह से बस रुका हुआ है कि वहाँ जाके जब इंटरव्यू दूंगा तो ये मेरे से चीज़ें उसी तरह पूछेंगे जैसे ओकेज ने बहुत लंबा इंटरव्यू लिया था। अब उसी हवाले से ये भी वही बात कर रही है अभी कि भाई हम कोशिश ये करते हैं कि कोई भी ऐसी कंपनी को लिस्ट ना करें जिसका फाउंडर नजर ना आ रहा हो, जिसका कोई बंदा नजर ना आ रहा हो, जिसके पास लिक्विडिटी ना हो, जो अपनी कोई क्रेडिबिलिटी ना रखता हो। तो ये क्रेडिबल लोगों को सिर्फ लेते हैं। तो अभी मेरी भी जब कॉइनबेस के साथ मीटिंग होगी तो मैं कोशिश करूंगा वो रिकॉर्डेड जो है आपको रिकॉर्डेड नहीं तो लाइव वहां से दिखा सकूं कि भाई मैं अपने लोगों को दिखाना चाहता हूं, भले आप हमारी एप्लीकेशन को जो भी करें.
what we can do here.
I think that that's a key, at least to me. If you knew anything about the Medicare system, you have Medicare providers, and we have probably 18% fraud in that system. That is a federal system that's been well understood. Wherever you open up your door, whatever your
फ्रॉड्स
storefront
के
is,
लिए ये बेसिकली
there's
बात
somebody
कर रहे हैं.
there
और जो
who's
लोग यहाँ
going
पूछ
to
रहे हैं मार्केट
find a way
ऊपर
to
जाएगी या नीचे
manipulate
जाएगी,
you,
अभी भाई
to spoof you, to
20 मिनट के
take
बाद
advantage of
ऊपर
the
जाए या
system.
नीचे जाए,
It
आपके
seems
पैसे
like to
जरूर
me
बनेंगे.
that
जितने
is
लोगों ने ग्रुप
something
ज्वाइन
that
नहीं
we
किया, ये
can
बिकम
do.
सपोर्टर
And
लिखा
if
हुआ है
Ms.
फेसबुक पे,
Seventeen
बिकम सपोर्टर पे
is
क्लिक करें,
part of the
टक
duty
करके
that
ज्वाइन
you
करें,
have
10-1200
to make
रुपए
sure
जीते
for
जाएंगे.
the integrity
जो
of your
बंदा हमारा
system,
12 बजे भी
it
बताए,
seems like to me that
अभी 10 बजे
I have
बताएगा, वो
satisfied
खरीदना है और वही
myself
बेचना है.
that
और
what
इसके साथ
you
साथ 11:30
have
शो होगा, तो वो
to
देखना है. बाकी भी सुन
have
रहे हैं, देखें क्या
ongoing,
करते
but
हैं.
where you think you want to go, we need to be
कौन सा कॉइन
supportive
लेना
of
है ये हम
that.
अपने
We
ग्रुप में
need
बताते
to
हैं भाई.
look at you as a
ये तो मैं इसलिए लाइव आ गया, मुझे पता था पाकिस्तान में न्यूज चैनल इस पे कुछ भी नहीं बोलेंगे, किसी को पता ही नहीं होगा. हाँ, इस वीडियो के बाद हो सकता है कोई यूट्यूबर आए कि अरे ये भी कोई इवेंट था.
what we believe the future should look like for people around the world and people in the United States. I would simply say to you, I encourage your integrity. I encourage you to avoid the pitfalls that come from there being some fraud that was hidden for a long period of time and the industry knew it.
बस बहरहाल वो ये कह रहा है कि भाई कोई ऐसा प्रोजेक्ट अगर आप लिस्ट कर लेंगे अपने एक्सचेंजेस पे जो बाद में चल के फ्रॉड बनेगा, तो फिर यूएस में क्रिप्टो के ऊपर पाबंदियां और इस किस्म की चीजें आएंगी, तो देख के आप प्लीज करें. नसीहत कर रहा है, कोई ऐसी पाबंदी नहीं लगा रहा.
Members, and I in particular want to thank my ranking member for his proactive viewpoint of Republican members that I hope would be supportive of what you're saying today. Thank you very much.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, who is the chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
शॉर्ट की पोजीशन आ रही है.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank you too for putting together this very, very important hearing.
इस मीटिंग में जो भी हो भाई, 10 मिनट के बाद हमारा शो शुरू हो जाएगा. इसमें हम ग्रुप में बताएंगे कौन सा कौन खरीदना है.
Industries is just unavoidable, and to get ahead of it. So your foresight, along with the ranking member, to do this is really important. Let me first ask my question to Mr. Alia. As you may be aware, communities of color often rely on minority depository institutions and community development financial institutions to safely do business and get access to crucial banking needs. And given their important role as well as the challenges that they face, I've been a long advocate for robust partnerships whereby MDIs and CDFIs can leverage.
बहरहाल अभी तक जो है ना, कोई ऐसी डरने की बात नहीं लग रही, लेकिन ये भी हो सकता है कि यहाँ डरने की बात ना लग रही हो, उधर कोई वेल आए बोले यार सब लॉन्ग कर रहे हैं पोजीशंस और मैनिपुलेट करने की कोशिश करें, तो जरा संभल के. हाँ, मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूँ, आजकल जो सिचुएशन चल रही है उसमें लाइव सेशंस अगर आपको दुनिया में कहीं भी मिलते हैं वहां चले जाएं, वरना जो जहां मैं आपको बता रहा हूं, बिकम सपोर्टर पे क्लिक करके लाइव सेशन में जो कॉइन बता रहे हो, 1-2 प्रॉफिट उसमें बनाकर 1-2% बनाकर 10% बना के बाहर आ जाओ. ये नहीं बोलो अभी खरीदें कल खरीदें, ये बहुत लंबा हो जाएगा. ये हम लोग 10 मिनट के बाद अभी प्राइवेट ग्रुप के अंदर, ईयरली ग्रुप में भी और बाकी ग्रुप में भी लाइव चले जाएंगे. बाकी मैं ये देख कर अगर इसमें कोई बहुत खास बात होगी तो बता दूंगा ग्रुप में यहाँ के, अगर नहीं होगी तो जरूरी नहीं है ये आज ही मीटिंग में हो, ये 2-3 दिन चलेगी और भी इसकी हियरिंग्स होगी, लेकिन इस पे नजर रखना जरूरी है अगर आपको बिटकॉइन का नेक्स्ट डंप या पंप पकड़ना है. ये राज की बातें कोई नहीं सिखाता, सारे ग्रुप कहेंगे कि ये बताओ नहीं, बस ये तो हम खुद कर लेंगे. ये तो मैं आपको सिखा रहा हूं कि ये तरीका होता है पंप और डंप पकड़ने का, कि न्यूज पे आपकी ग्रिप हो.
Held behind USDC and actually place those with minority deposit institutions and community banks throughout the United States. I think one thing that's important to understand is that unlike a bank that wants to maybe hoard its deposits for its own lending business as a full reserve model, we're not in the business of lending. And so it's a tremendous opportunity for us to work closely with banking institutions that could benefit from strengthened balance sheets, that could benefit from what that can then do, what that in turn can do to open up credit and lending and other opportunities in these underserved communities. So this particular initiative is one that we've just began. We expect to have the first wave of that in place.
आई नो आधे लोग कह रहे होंगे अबे क्या अंग्रेजी में टकला लगा हुआ ये वो फलाना ढिमाका, तो मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूँ
Federal banking regulators who have
सुनना
their
जरूरी है।
own initiatives that are focused on supporting MDIs and community banks. And we view this as a really critical and strategic part of what we can do to foster a more inclusive financial system. Final comment is simply that we believe that the technology of digital currency, the frictionlessness, the way in which individuals with mobile devices can actively participate, and not just domestically, but interacting with family members around the world and safely exchanging value, that these can also bring significant benefits to these communities. And we will certainly keep the committee up to date on progress with this initiative.
लैंडिंग के बारे में वही
Well, thank you very much for that. And let me go to Ms. Hass real quick. You talked about technology enhancements, and I know that crypto and digital currencies can bring to our financial markets that they're really impressive. For example, I know a lot of communities rely on these new modes of payment systems to send money to their families in their home countries. And, this type of activity is, of course, extremely useful to our global economy, which is really important. But there are also bad actors out there that could use crypto or digital currencies to hide cash from illicit activity. Also, people can hide cash, not to pay their support payments and other things. So my question is,
बोलो भाई।
how can we, and what is being put in place to keep the bad actors out there? And so, I know in your testimony, Ms. Hass, you mentioned that there's a small amount of non-compliant foreign exchanges where criminal actors benefit financially from illicit activity. So what's your assessment of our global coordination on stamping out such activity, and what more can the United States policymakers do to better coordinate with regulators across shores to prevent this arbitrage that you referred to?
Thank you so much for the question. So as I shared on the Coinbase platform, we do have KYC, a BSA AML program, and we ensure that we know who our customers are and then have.
अच्छा, ओवरऑल जो बात हो रही है ना, देखिए मैं भी आपको बताऊं, ओवरऑल जो सारी बात हो रही है वो इस पे हो रही है कि आप प्रोटेक्शन कैसे होगी, इसके ऊपर बात होगी। सुफियान अभी लाइव जाएंगे, वहां पर होगा, सिर्फ तुम्हें जवाब देने के लिए आ जाऊं मैं क्या? अब यहाँ पर अभी 15 मिनट के बाद लाइव जा रहे हैं। ये जो भी मीटिंग में हो रहा है, इसमें मुझे नहीं लगता कि कोई बहुत बुरी खबर आने वाली है, कोई बुरी बात आने वाली है। लेकिन आपको ट्रेड अगर करनी है तो आप प्लीज अगर आपने पैसे नहीं भी लगाने तो पेपर पे सिर्फ आपने लिखकर प्राइवेट ग्रुप में जो है सिर्फ आपने वहां पर जो है प्राइवेट ग्रुप में देखना है। अभी 10 बजे और 11:30 बजे बड़ा जबरदस्त अभी लाइव शो होगा, और अपने पास लिख के रख लेना है अपने। सिर्फ अगर आप पैसे नहीं भी लगाना चाहते, सिर्फ इमेजिन करना है कि अगर मैं 100 रुपए लगाता तो क्या होता, अगर मैं 200 रुपए लगाता तो क्या होता। तो मैं सिर्फ इसलिए भी लाइव आ गया था ताकि आपको एजुकेट कर सकूं कि अभी ये लाइव चल रहा है, अमेरिका में इस वक्त लाइव हो रहा है ये, और इसके अंदर हो सकता है कोई ऐसी बात निकल जाए जिससे बोले यार क्रिप्टो नहीं होनी चाहिए, कि हैक इसमें बड़े होते हैं, प्रोटेक्शन नहीं होती, इसमें कॉइन कोई लॉन्च करता है और भाग जाता है। तो ये बड़ा एक चक्कर जो है हो रहा है। तो ये बड़ा सीन है कि समझने की बात है कि किस तरीके से इन तमाम चीज़ों के अंदर यार ज़रूरी ये होता है कि एक मिनट देखो, एक मिनट रुको, हाँ एक मिनट इनकी बात सुन लेते पहले।
So dollars as a share of the European Central Bank, the Japanese Central Bank, et cetera, has shrunk from 80+% to more like 60+% in a short amount of time. What that tells me is that in the future, with the rise of China and other major economies, the US dollar can't take its primacy for granted, and we need to start thinking about competing on utility, on features, not just based on a post-World War II monetary system that we could take for granted for the last 2 generations. And that's one of the reasons that I've been such a supporter of internet-enabled dollars, which allow us to compete on features, not only on history. I think that's really critically important. The second thing I would tell you is,
अच्छा, मुझे तो नहीं लग रहा अभी इसमें कोई बुरी बात ऐसी आएगी तो हम अपडेट आपको ज़रूर करेंगे, लेकिन फॉर द टाइम बिंग अब टाइम हो गया कि जो बिकम सपोर्टर वाला ये सेक्शन है, जो फेसबुक पे आप जब बिकम सपोर्टर पे क्लिक करते हैं तो अभी 10 मिनट के बाद टीम मेंबर्स लाइव जाएंगे और मार्केट को देखते हुए आपको बताएंगे कुछ ना कुछ परसेंटेज ऑफ प्रॉफिट आपका बनेगा। सिर्फ लाइव सेशंस को फॉलो करो, रिटर्न सिग्नल मत उठाना, दिसंबर का महीना बड़ा खतरनाक है क्रिप्टो के लिए, बहुत रेगुलेशंस, बहुत सारे चक्कर चल रहे हैं। प्लीज प्लीज मेरी रिक्वेस्ट है, अगर तुम किसी भी ग्रुप को फॉलो करते हो, रिटर्न सिग्नल नहीं उठाना, फ्यूचर में जरा देख के जाना। रिटर्न सिग्नल उठाओगे प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है। यहाँ पे अभी 10 बजे लाइव होगा और पाकिस्तान टाइम के मुताबिक 11:30 बजे का सेशन भी बड़ा जबरदस्त होगा। उसमें जो कॉइन बता रहे हो, अगर आपको पास पैसे नहीं भी हैं, आपने पेपर पे सिर्फ लिख लेना है, अगर मैं ये कॉइन लेता इसके बोलने पे तो कितना प्रॉफिट होता। तो बाकी अगर कोई बुरी खबर आती है मैं बता देता हूँ, इंशाल्लाह कोशिश है अवेयरनेस फैलाना इसकी। तो प्राइवेट ग्रुप में, क्योंकि 10 मिनट बाद लाइव है, तो मुझे